Absolutely. Can you hear me? Testing, testing, testing. Perfect. Fantastic. Just a couple more minutes before we get started. We'll let a little more people roll in. We'll start at 1 p.m. Well, hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Alexis Rogers, and I'm the Customer Relationship Lead here at Ray Capital. And I want to say welcome to our Planning Opportunities with Workplace Retirement Savings CFP CE webinar. And so today we're going to be diving into the realm of workplace savings, shedding some light on the myriad of opportunities available to enhance clients' financial well-being, from employer-sponsored retirement plans to innovative saving strategies. We're aiming to equip you with the knowledge and tools necessary to make informed decisions with your clients. And before we dive into it, as this is a CFP CE presentation, if you are looking to receive a CFP CE credit, you will have to stay for a full 50 minutes of content. And if you do so, you'll see that credit applied within a couple business days. We're very pleased to be here today to offer some CFP CE credits. And one thing I want to note is that if you are joining us from a live stream source such as LinkedIn, YouTube, or X, aka Twitter, we unfortunately cannot offer a CE credit for this session. However, if you would be interested in joining free CFP CE credit webinars in the future, please feel free to email webinars@rightcapital.com to join our mailing list. And one thing I want to note too, as we're covering a lot of information, there's definitely going to be questions that are asked. We want to make sure that you are equipped to have the information that you need to provide informed decisions and make informed decisions with your clients. So feel free to leverage the Q&A section to ask questions, and we'll be sure to address them at the end of the presentation. As I said, we've got a lot of content to get through, so we're going to navigate through those and answer any questions you might have at the end of the webinar. As we ultimately, especially at Ray Capital, we look at being the visual backdrop for these conversations with your clients and allowing for you to assist your clients in connecting the dots with the client, whether you're using Ray Capital or another planning tool. We want to ensure that your clients can understand the topics you're discussing and see the value of what you're looking at. And so today we're going to be walking through these topics and providing you with some insightful resources to hopefully assist in strengthening your conversations regarding opportunities stemming from retirement workplace savings, especially with these new opportunities we're about to cover. As we know, we have had the recent increases and enhancements to the contribution limits and a couple changes with the Secure Act 2.0 that went into effect this year. We're going to be covering all of that today. And so some of the other things that we're going to be highlighting today is going to be revolving some of those recent increases to contribution limits and the opportunities that those provide us when we're looking at the future year savings. This is a very timely webinar, as especially we're starting the year off strong. We're going to be reviewing some of those opportunities that, if clients aren't already taking advantage of some of those savings opportunities, they might be a new path for them to take. And we're going to look at how each of them might function and some of those different rule changes that have happened as a result of Secure Act 2.0. We're also going to be highlighting some of those more unique opportunities that are applicable for certain clients. There certainly are a lot of different unique situations on a client-by-client basis, but there are additional savings opportunities and tax-smart savings opportunities in regards to mega, backdoor, Roth, and net unrealized appreciation, or NUAs, as I'm going to refer to it throughout the presentation. These are just a couple that we're going to touch on, the nuances behind each of these, and which clients this might be best suited for, as it's not a situation that might be applicable or available for all clients, but it's certainly something we're going to be reviewing in detail shortly. We're also going to look at highlighting combining different tax-smart saving strategies and tax-efficient distributions that can be applied to enhance somebody's tax situation. And so diving into it, we're going to be looking at some of those updates that have happened recently as we've had the start of the new year. And so some of the updates that have happened in terms of saving opportunities, especially with the IRS's recent announcement of the increased contribution limits and some of the different applicable rule changes and new saving opportunities as a part of that Secure Act 2.0. We're going to be highlighting what those changes look like and what they provide for your clients, and also some key insights that you can also provide for your clients, and also just keep in the back of your mind as you're navigating discussions with your clients. And so when we are looking at current year's contribution limits, there has been some increases in certain places, but a lot of the catch-up contributions have not increased themselves. And so this has been a historical couple years in terms of changes and impacts to contributions from 401k accounts and a couple new savings opportunities that have popped up in the past couple of years. So it's important to highlight this and curate a further understanding of these recent changes And so when we have those employee-sponsored retirement plans that fall under the 401k, 403b, 457b, and 401a account types, we have had a nice increase to the catch-up or to the contribution limits for 2024. As you can see, there's been an increase to $23,000 for this year. The catch-up contribution for most of these has remained the same, like I've said. So that's still going to remain $7,500 for those that are 50 plus. And so that's going to be one of those key insights that we want to keep in the back of our mind when we are looking at a client. And if we see that, this year they're going to be turning 50, or maybe next year, or they turned 50 last year, that is going to provide us with some additional opportunities to further bolster our retirement portfolio that we're looking at, especially when we're looking at the 401k accounts, things like that. They have some nice ability to further bolster their own savings opportunities. Of course, the employer might be matching something different, and that's going to be always subject to that overall limit of the $69,000 for defined contribution plans. That is going to be increased to $76,500 for those that are age 50 plus, because we are going to be considering that catch-up contribution that's applicable for those that are 50 plus. So like I said, some additional savings opportunities for those that are nearer to retirement when they're getting closer to those retirement years. That's intended to assist in bolstering their portfolio to last them longer in retirement. The similar mindset when we're looking at things like the solo 401k, that's also going to be subject to that overall defined contribution plan limit of the $69,000. Also considering that catch-up contribution of $7,500 for those that are 50 plus. So some nice savings opportunities there. When we're looking at the SEP IRA, that and the profit sharing and employee stock ownership plans, those are going to be based off of the 25% of earnings. One thing to note when we're talking about the 25% of earnings, it is going to be considering that there is an income cap for contributions, and it's only going to look at, for 2024, $345,000 of income. These are also going to be subject to the overarching limit of $69,000 plus the catch-up contribution. So that's another thing to keep in mind. It's a little bit of a different treatment for these different saving opportunities. When we're looking at things like the simple IRA, for 2024, we had a nice increase of another $500. So we can now contribute $16,000 and $3,500 for the catch-up contribution. And when we're looking at the employee stock purchase plan, which is a different sort of idea for employee-sponsored or employer-sponsored plan, that's going to be a contribution limit of $25,000. This has not changed in the past couple of years, so it's maintained a consistent $25,000 here. And it's that idea that employees can purchase company stock at a discount. So that's a little bit of a different type of retirement savings opportunity that might be available, but keeping in mind that the $25,000, especially when we're looking at future planning, that particular contribution limit has not changed in a couple of years. So this is probably going to stay very similar to the $25,000 as it's done in the past couple of years, but it is a nice savings opportunities for those that might have this available to them. And of course, a lot of this is really dependent upon what the employer is offering in terms of savings opportunities and employer matching. But this is specifically looking at the employee or the client's contributions and what the overarching defined contribution limit looks like as well. On that note, there are some additional saving opportunities that we would be remiss without mentioning, especially as we are in the year of one of the big changes from Secure Act 2.0 taking effect. And so some of the things that were changed for this year in particular, that's going to be for the traditional IRA. In 2024, they ruled out and placed into effect that the catch-up contributions for the traditional IRA is going to be indexed for inflation. What that means is right now the contribution limit for 2024 is $7,000. But for those that are 50 plus, that catch-up contribution is really intended to allow for further savings, especially for those that are on the precipice of retirement. It's supposed to grant some additional savings opportunities. So they've intended to increase that when we have, some cost of living adjustments and increasing it for inflation, as that has not been something that's previously been done. With that in mind, though, they did decide for 2024 that the catch-up contribution of $1,000 is going to remain the same. So that's still going to be $1,000 for this year, which it was the same for last year. So there was no increase there, but hopefully for 2025, we will see a change there. Some of the other changes that are going to be happening is going to be in regards to 2025. So when we look at those other saving opportunities for the 401k and similar retirement sponsored plans or employer sponsored plans, there's going to be additional savings opportunities for those that are in the prime age of 60 to 63 for those catch-up contributions. When somebody reaches that age, starting in 2025, they're going to have additional opportunities to save the greater of $10,000 or 150% of the standard catch-up contribution limit indexed for inflation. And so that's going to be a nice opportunity. So similar mindset to the actual catch-up contribution opportunity for age 50 plus. This is really intended to allow for an additional savings opportunity for those that might have been greatly impacted by the COVID phase. And if there were lapse of savings, this is intended to allow for a cushion for that time period for those starting 2025. When they reach that prime age, it's supposed to fill that gap and allow for them to further bolster their retirement portfolio. So that's another thing to keep in mind when we are looking at future planning opportunities for next year for those that are going to be reaching ages 60 to 63, what additional savings opportunities are available for them. Some of the other opportunities that are available as a result of Secure Act 2.0 is going to be the SEP Roth IRA and the Simple Roth IRA. Both of these were recently introduced as a result of the Secure Act 2.0. So this is another great opportunity that has already been put into effect and has had some increases to contribution limits for this year. So it's a good thing to keep in mind. And these are very similar to the SEP IRA and Simple IRA, except this is a nice Roth opportunities for those that have this opportunity available to them. Keeping in mind all these recent changes to the contribution limits and those additional savings opportunities, there are, of course, some things that we might be looking at in terms of what we might be preferring to save into for specific clients, especially when we look at high income clients. The priorities might be shifting from just saving towards a typical 401k, maybe looking at the different tax pyramid and where we might be wanting to designate funds to earn tax-free income. So this is one of my favorite charts here, this little tax dedicated pyramid. Looking at the top of the pyramid, we're looking at that deferred tax-free Roth account, which we're going to be diving into in more detail later, which is that mega backdoor Roth account for those that might have that opportunity. And then we're also looking at that tax-free Roth of the backdoor Roth. And then we have those double tax-free section, which is going to be made up of the IRAs, the 401k, and the 529s. And then we have the triple tax-free section, which is looking at, of course, one of the most preferred, and this is definitely different depending upon the state that you're in. Of course, we consider those different state implications, but for the most part, we're going to consider it on the general terms that the HSA or the health savings account is that triple tax-free savings opportunities. So this is going to be that tax-friendly chart, keeping in mind for those higher income earners, where we might want to be devoting more resources into to ensure that we are enjoying some additional tax-free burdens later on in life, especially with those HSAs and looking at some of the higher costs of healthcare and retirement that might provide some opportunities depending upon, of course, what the client situation looks like. And on that note, talking a little bit more about the mega backdoor Roth opportunity that some clients might have available to them. This is going to be a more tax-free preferential retirement sponsored plan. And so when we're looking at the mega backdoor Roth opportunity, this is going to have a similar contribution limit to that overarching defined contribution plan limit of the $69,000 for those that are below age 50. And this is going to be applicable to that mega backdoor Roth opportunity. One thing to keep in mind is that this is going to be a shared contribution limit. So anything that is being contributed to the 401k by either client and employer, that is going to be taking away essentially, in lack of better words, from that overarching $69,000. So any difference between that $69,000 and the combination of employee and employer contributions can be contributed to the after-tax 401k, aka the mega backdoor Roth. This can provide some additional Roth options for certain 401k plans. And this, of course, depends upon what the offerings are for employers, keeping in mind what their savings opportunities that they're presenting to their employees look like. That's a good thing to note before we dive into this, is just making sure that we are considering what the employer is offering in terms of 401k matching and their 401k program. And so this is only an option if a client's 401k plan allows for after-tax 401k contributions. So that's why it's really important to first understand what is the situation for the number one, client's savings into the 401k, the employer matching, but also if the employer is offering this as an option for them. And so looking at 2024, a client can contribute as much as $46,000, noting, of course, that if you're over 50, the savings opportunities are a little bit different then. But if you're below 50, it's going to be that $46,000 as an after-tax 401k contribution. And that's just considering maxing out the traditional 401k savings. One thing to note about the mega backdoor Roth strategy and what makes this a very unique savings opportunity is that this contribution amount can be rolled over to a Roth IRA, which is typically the more common path, or a Roth 401k option. So you have two options presented to you. Typically, the Roth 401k is the less commonly traveled path, and the Roth IRA is just a little bit more commonly what advisors and clients target. Another nuance to the mega backdoor Roth strategy is if the employer's 401k plan provides for in-service withdrawals, the contribution can be rolled to a Roth annually. If they don't offer that in-service withdrawal, the after-tax contributions can stay in the 401k plan and would be rolled over and executed at the separation of service or other key life events. So there are two main options when we're looking at the mega backdoor Roth strategy in terms of how these funds can be pushed over to the Roth. So it either can happen on an annual basis or whenever you might be designating it based on the in-service withdrawals, dependent upon what the employer is offering for their 401k plan. Otherwise, that's going to be a rollover at the end of service with the company. So that's another thing when we're doing that future planning. What is the client's path? And of course, really emphasizing to you, it's important to understand what the employer has designated out for their 401k programs, especially for the mega backdoor Roth strategy. If this is something that we're looking to take advantage for in terms of additional savings opportunities, this is going to be something that we want to make sure we understand which path are they allowing the client to take. And we can keep that in mind when we're doing future projections, especially when we're looking in the future, if somebody's in that option of only being able to roll over at that life event of separation of service, that key event of when are they going to be retiring and when should we be planning for maybe some surplus cash flow to be covering any sort of expenses, anything like that. Another good thing to note for the mega backdoor Roth strategy is that any gains on the contributions will need to stay in the 401k or be rolled to a traditional IRA. So any growth is going to stay in that specific plan. And so backing up a little bit about how does the mega backdoor Roth work? So when we're looking at the mega backdoor Roth, we're going to have those different options that we were covering a little bit earlier. So we're going to see that after-tax 401k contribution rolled over to the Roth IRA. And any of that 401k growth, any gains that have happened since you did contribute, which hopefully your account is growing over time. So hopefully you're in the situation where you have some gains that this will be an option for you. If that's the case, that is when we would see it rolled over to the traditional IRA. But those contributions themselves, that pure figure, is going to be an option for that Roth IRA, for that additional savings opportunity and building out that nice little Roth account for retirement. And so looking at a little bit of a case study for Samantha. So she's age 40, she's below that 50 age range for that catch-up contribution. So she is maxing out her 401k contribution of $23,000 for this year. And she's working with her firm. They're offering her some fantastic savings opportunities. And we're going to be looking at what makes sense for her. And so one thing to note is, of course, step one, understanding the client's contribution and also the employer matching that's applicable. So her employer is matching $5,000 into the 401k. Taking the $5,000 plus the $23,000, subtracting this from the overarching defined contribution limit of $69,000, this allows for a nice savings opportunity to that mega backdoor Roth or the after-tax 401k of $38,500. And so she has that option of converting it to the Roth account via the mega backdoor Roth opportunity. And so with her Roth strategy, that's going to be some additional savings for her and allowing for her to build out her portfolio. So that's going to be one of those things that can be applicable for certain clients. It really depends upon their own circumstances and their background. But there are, of course, things that we want to consider when we're looking at this. It's, of course, having tax-free money can be a good thing, and especially in retirement. But there's certain pros and cons when we're looking at things like the mega backdoor Roth strategy, for example. And so one thing we want to consider on the higher level is for a client situation, what is their income looking like? Maybe for lower income earners, this might not be an opportunity available to them, especially if they don't have, we want to consider what funds they have available to save. So if they have that surplus cash flow available to contribute to their 401k and max that out, and also max out this mega backdoor Roth saving strategy, that might be when it's best for them. But there are those different client situations where this might not be the best suited path for them and for maybe their surplus cash flow for certain years. And of course, considering the future plan, nobody knows what's going to happen in the future, but considering at least this year and where they fall into this year's projected path. Another thing that's nice, and this makes it a little bit more better suited for higher income earners or clients, is that this is not subject to any income limits. So what we were looking at before in terms of with a lot of IRAs, things like that, there are income phase outs that are applicable. That's not true for the mega backdoor Roth strategy. So that grants those higher income earners an additional savings opportunity that they might not have for different savings plans. Another little stipulation is that, of course, the employer needs to be offering that after-tax 401k contribution. So it's a good thing to note that this could be a potential opportunity for certain clients. And one of those things in the stipulations, in order to fully analyze this as a path, is ensuring that the employer is actually offering this as an option, as it's not just widely available to everyone, unfortunately. And of course, that idea that individuals need to have the ability to save a considerable amount from their salary. So if we're in a tighter budget for this year, it might not be that time to look at maxing out and doing a mega backdoor Roth strategy, but maybe for further years, we might have that further surplus to devote towards the different saving buckets. And that bigger consideration too, that we kind of discussed a little bit, is the idea of what the employer is truly offering. So while it's nice that we can push this over to the Roth account, if the employer is not offering in-service withdrawals while they're still working at the company, considering that they are going to be probably needing to have this deferred until they separate from service or retire, what is that going to look like? This might be a path if they're not offering that in-service withdrawals. If they're planning on leaving the company in a couple of years, maybe then we'd consider the mega backdoor Roth strategy. But if somebody is young and maybe working for the company for the next 40 years, is this a path that we want to take, or do we want to focus on different strategies? This is just one of those nuances to consider in terms of what the main paths are for mega backdoor Roths. And especially talking about that younger client, there is a risk involved when we're looking at this particular tax advantage strategy, and that there hasn't been a lot of regulation change, as we were just touching on, especially the Steer Act 2.0 changing a lot and making historic changes to contribution opportunities. There's a similar risk here in that the regulation might change in the future and will not allow for Roth conversions down the road. Of course, nobody knows what's going to happen in the future, but this is something that is being discussed and is a hot topic. And it's something to keep in mind too, that this is a discussion that's happening in terms of what might be the best path for a mega backdoor Roth strategy. And for those that might be extremely young, maybe this wouldn't be the best strategy if this is a concern from the client or something that you guys are discussing. So it's just one of those things to keep in mind with this. While this is a really great opportunity to save some additional money, and of course, put more into the Roth account, which can always be good, there are those things that we want to consider before pursuing this and seeing what might be best for the client, of course, and making those informed decisions. And that brings us to one of my favorite topics, which is going to be the net unrealized appreciation or NUA opportunity. So this can be a key opportunity for those that, once again, that they're in this specific situation. And this might provide some preferential tax treatment in terms of distributions or things along those lines. So giving that background as to the net unrealized appreciation or NUA, this is applicable for those 401k and ESOP plans. And especially when a client owns company stock in that 401k or an ESOP plan or a profit sharing plan, it also falls under here. This is a situation where if they have a significant amount that's concentrated in that position, this might be something that we want to look at for them as an opportunity to diversify their portfolio and also pursue different paths, of course. So these are just going to be some key considerations when we're looking at NUAs. Number one is going to be if they have a significantly concentrated position and if that stock has highly appreciated over time. That's when the NUA can really help in this situation. So let's say, for example, they have a stock that's appreciated $100,000, $200,000 over time, and they have it in particularly their company stock of ABC. That's when we might want to take a step back and have that little bit of a flag waved of should we be pursuing an NUA and how might this help? And so an NUA distribution can allow you to recognize the appreciation as long-term capital gains and the cost basis as ordinary income, which can be very advantageous in many scenarios, especially if we've had a large amount of appreciation and a difference between cost basis and non-cost basis, aka the long-term capital gain portion for an NUA. This can allow for a little bit of an alleviation of some tax burden for those that are in this situation, of course. So taking that step back of looking at the 401k plan, what are they invested in terms of that stock, and have we had a lot of appreciation here? And so what is involved with an NUA? So once again, evaluating if the client's eligible for the NUA is the first step. And when we do consider that, we look at if they own that company stock in their 401k or ESOP or profit sharing plan. Another thing to consider is that there has to be a little bit of a triggering event in order to have this as an opportunity. So if they've retired, if they separated from service, aka stopped working with their company, or if they reached 59 and a half, one of those other prime ages to consider and keep in the back of our mind, and they are now eligible to do in-kind transfers. When they meet this criteria, that's when we can take that lump sum distribution after the trigger event, and we can look at performing the NUA. One thing to note is that even if we are cherry picking, which you do have the option to do, the entire account itself needs to be distributed and would just need to be put into a different plan. So it can't stay in that same 401k plan, for example. It would need to be put over to a different path. For even the one that is not going to be the subject to the NUA, the remaining portion would need to be put into a different account itself. And so what is the difference between a regular distribution versus the NUA? There's going to be some key differences here. And so just looking at a little bit of an example here, if we have a client that has a concentrated position of $500,000 of company stock in their 401k plan, the stock has a cost basis of $100,000 from the employer contribution. So we have an unrealized cap gain of $400,000 here. This is primarily a key factor for the NUA. And so that's when we might look at proposing to liquidate $500,000 of the concentrated position to diversify the portfolio. Maybe especially too, depending upon their relationship, it might be something that they're looking to split their paths. And especially if they have $500,000 in this one stock, maybe we're looking to really, push it into different funds, things like that. So that's another consideration here. And we can use that NUA distribution to convert that $400,000 and have it be taxed as ordinary income, as opposed to the distribution, which would have been taxed as ordinary income, to a long-term capital gains, which is a more favorable tax rate. So as opposed to that normal distribution, it would have been ordinary income, which can be subject, of course, depending upon the client's situation, to some higher tax rates. And we can have that be converted and pushed to the long-term capital gain section. So this can be a great opportunity for those that are in this position. And if they have this heavily concentrated stock, for you to cherry pick and say, we're going to be distributing this amount and we're going to be pursuing an NUA. Another thing to consider when we're looking at the NUA is, should we be doing an NUA or should we just be rolling over the assets to an IRA? One of the things with NUAs is that these result in immediate tax expenses for a current year, but it does convert ordinary income tax rates to long-term capital gains tax, which can be helpful specifically if we have that highly, highly appreciated stock. Whereas if we're looking at a rollover to an IRA, this does not result in tax for the current year, but all gains will be taxed as ordinary income when distributed. So it's that common and very, very common question of, should I be playing the long game or should we be looking at more short-term goals and how that might be impacting the long-term expenses, especially when we're paying taxes? Can we afford to be paying higher taxes now, or should we be waiting till later when we might have more cushion to pay those taxes? So really considering the full scope here and that comprehensive look at what can we afford in our surplus cash flows, another consideration for the NUA in terms of that tax bill. And that other consideration too is if we have that highly appreciated stock, this would probably be better suited for an NUA just because you would be saving a little bit more in terms of tax rates. Of course, depending on the client situation. And like I said, depending on the client situation and their tax rates at the time of NUA and their tax rate at retirement, these are key considerations. So maybe if their retirement phase is, of course, going to be different than their current phases while they're working, those are things that we want to consider. And so we do have a module, particularly in a tool like Right Capital, and there are other tools out there that can help in having these conversations and take all these key considerations into account when we're looking at having that visual backdrop for if we should do an NUA or not. These are all things, especially those contribution limits that we covered earlier, that are all baked into Right Capital's calculations. So when we are modeling these opportunities, this will be something automatically considered and something that you can also easily visualize for both you and your clients' discussions. And so a common thing and a common question with NUAs is it possible to do a partial NUA and roll over the rest to an IRA? Yes, absolutely. But like I said, all assets must leave the plan. So even if you want to be very selective in what you have contributed to the NUA and pay that tax on now, you can cherry pick what you want to have as a consideration for that NUA. We could do that $500,000, for example, and maybe the account's worth 1.5 million, pretty nice account right now. That other million you can leave and have rolled over to a traditional IRA, but the entirety of the account needs to be pushed over to a different path. So we're looking at the highly appreciated company stock in their 401k plan. We can put that into an NUA distribution and divert that to a little bit of a brokerage account and have that reinvested there. When we're looking at the remaining funds of that 1.5 million, for an example, and it's that mostly a little bit of a modest appreciated stock in the 401k or maybe other mutual funds in the 401k that we don't want to pursue an NUA with, those can be rolled over to the traditional IRA or a different path. Just major consideration here is ensuring that we are distributing all of the funds from that specific retirement 401k plan that we did the NUA out of. And so looking at a little bit of a case study here, we're going to be meeting Jonathan. He's currently 60. He's just changed to a new job. So that's going to be that flag there that he is going to be looking at that triggering event, which allows for him to be pursuing that NUA opportunity. He has company stock in a 401k plan with his previous employer that he just left of that $500,000. $150,000 of that company stock is highly appreciated over the years with a cost basis of $20,000. So that's when we would look at the NUA for the $150,000 of highly appreciated stock and change that from an ordinary income taxation to a long-term capital gains rate. Especially, there are those different stipulations for 401k plans, and that's why it's really important to get that deeper understanding of what an employer's considerations are for 401k offerings. If he needed to pull funds from that 401k and transfer it to a different one, this might be an opportunity as well for an NUA. So if that were the case, maybe the NUA would be a better path than maybe the full different taxation or different rollovers. So those are just key considerations when we're looking at this on the higher level and also considering the client's background and what their current surplus cash flow looks over. And so for him, he rolled over the rest of the account to an IRA. And so he enjoyed some nice tax benefits. And so this is, like I said, going to be in any ways a great opportunity for those that this is leveraged for in a proper way, and considering the background and what the offerings are for a client and where they are in life, and if they are going to be looking at a triggering event in the future, and should this be something we're considering. This is really a great opportunity when we're looking at the portfolio, and if we see that the 401k or the ESOP or anything like that has that really high appreciated value for that specific stock, that's when the annuity strategy would work best. And if we have, of course, that surplus cash flow to really fund those additional expenses. The downside is that the client has to pay ordinary income tax on cost basis immediately. If the unrealized appreciation is limited, the client might be better off pursuing different rollovers without doing it anyway, especially if they have a triggering event and they need to roll it over anyways, potentially looking at that as opposed to doing it anyway. But of course, keeping in mind that you can cherry pick the stocks with the significant unrealized appreciation for the distribution itself. So you don't need to do the entire account. If it was that 1.5 million example, you don't need to fully do an anyway on the 1.5, especially for that tax burden that might be really high for this year. You can cherry pick and say, I just want that $500,000. And so when we take that and we start to put it all together and look at those different savings opportunities that we've looked at so far, and especially considering those increases to savings opportunities from that contribution limit increases and a result of Secure Act 2.0, we're going to be talking a little bit more of different strategies that we can take and talking about some of those tax efficient or tax smart saving strategies. And so we're going to be looking at a case study with the Brady's, again, to do a little bit of a deeper dive and a use case scenario for different strategies. For Mike and Amanda, they're currently in their mid 40s and they're married. They have a key goal of retiring at age 65, which is pretty nice for them. They got a couple years to go. And they have some decent income, some high expenses in retirement. They want to, also go on vacations in the future, but their monthly expenses are looking at $10,000 in retirement. They also have, going off my example of the 1.5 million in assets, not considering their primary home, of course, but they have $1 million in qualified and 500,000 in non-qualified assets. And we're going to be looking at what is applicable for them. So they have some nice salary. They've got some nice surplus cash flow right now. They are pretty avid spenders currently, but we want to look at what might be better suited for them. So as you can see, they're earning $450,000 a year. And so we really want to ensure that we are maximizing the opportunities that we have available to us and what might make sense for this higher earner income family. And so looking at that tax smart saving strategy, like I said, they're pretty avid savers. They're saving $70,000 a year into a brokerage account. That's their current path in life. But we, of course, know that we have that increased contribution limit for 2024, which is fantastic. And so we also want to take advantage of that. We want to max out the 401k. We also want to take advantage of a mega backdoor Roth. So we're also going to be devoting $30,000 to there. And we're just going to be divvying up that $70,000 that they're saving into the brokerage account. Instead of focusing so much on the brokerage account, we're going to put them into some tax advantage savings opportunities or employee retired sponsored savings opportunities. So we're going to look at splitting that up into the pre-tax 401k, into the mega Roth, and then still keeping that core value of saving into the brokerage account of $17,000. So we're just going to be splitting it up so it's a little bit more proportionate and allowing for additional tax-free situations to happen there. We also have additional layer here where we have a concentrated position in an ESOP plan that is highly appreciated. We have $500,000 in the company stock that's appreciated. Their current strategy is to roll it over to an IRA, but we're going to be looking at that anyway situation and doing that with that $500,000 with that cost basis of $100,000 for the ESOP. And so applying these to the plan, when we're looking at tools like Right Capital, we of course offer some key visuals that can really assist in having stronger conversations with clients. and allowing for there to be a smoother conversation and allow for you to help the clients connect the dots as to why you might be suggesting what you're suggesting. And so this is just an example. There are, of course, other tools out there, but when we apply that tax smart saving strategy, including the NUA and the differentiation of what we're saving into, this can increase the client's ending investable assets. As we can see, they have 7.4 million more if they pursued that path. We're also going to see the opportunity, of course, probably the second most asked question when we're looking at saving more in those assets is, what am I paying in taxes? And so as we can see, we have that difference between their current path and their current $70,000 into the taxable brokerage account and rolling over to an IRA versus our tax advantage and tax smart savings opportunities. This is going to be actually in the long run allowing for way less, 1.5 million less, in fact, of total taxes paid across their lifetime. So that's that key consideration too, and especially for that common idea of, should we be playing the short game and really, earning money faster or saving more faster versus the longer term gain of, if I devote more to tax free, or if I do this kind of NUA and we're putting more into a Roth account, how much more am I going to be paying in taxes, if at all? And how might this be saving me money? So in this case, as we can see for them, when we apply this situation, they're actually going to be paying less in total taxes over time. They are paying more at a different point in time when they retire. As we can see, there's a little bit of a spike there. But over time, there is significantly less in terms of the tax smart saving strategy. So this is going to be that visualization that can assist in guiding that conversation of, as we can see, you're still going to be paying taxes over time, but it's just how much are we paying in the long run? As we can see, there's significantly less for this particular strategy. But there are different strategies that we can apply, also looking at a tax efficient distribution and what that might present as an opportunity for additional preferential tax treatment, especially in the retirement years or for those that are going to be retiring in the next couple years. We have that tax preferred saving strategy and the tax efficient distributions that we want to consider when we're looking at savings. Should we be, maxing out employer opportunities in terms of, if they're matching something, should we be maxing out the 401k? And do we have the opportunity for some of those mega backdoor Roth savings as well? And especially when we're looking at our case study too, they are avid savers, but they weren't taking advantage of some of those employer sponsored plans and what we'd recommend as some tax savings or tax smart savings opportunities. So that can be that opportunity for additional differentiation between you and other advisors, for example. And so it's that deeper understanding of, clients may be better off saving to tax deferred 401ks now and converting to Roth accounts in the future. So especially when we're looking at this as another opportunity, when we're looking at Roth conversions in particular, kind of playing off of that idea, is it better to, pay more in taxes up front and pay less over time, versus should I be deferring that taxation to when I might have more cushion? This is really dependent upon a client's cash flow, of course. So if you've got that surplus cash flow, this might be a good opportunity for them. If they don't have that surplus cash flow, it might be better to, save into the tax deferred 401k for now. And once they have that opportunity, maybe a couple of years from now, we might look at converting to Roth accounts in the future. Especially if clients are delaying Social Security to age 70, there might be additional partial Roth conversion opportunities before age 70. And when Social Security and when, depending upon the Secure Act 2.0 changes and how old people are and their birth dates, when RMDs start. So for those that are born a little bit later in life, that's going to be 75. For those that are in that specific birth date range, it's going to be 73. So that key consideration of where they fall into their birth dates when they're filing for Social Security and when we see those RMDs kick in. And so does that provide us with additional opportunities in terms of that tax bracket dropping? And can we fill up the tax bracket during those years with some Roth conversions? And so using a tax efficient sequence of withdrawals in conjunction with Roth conversions can really maximize the value of looking at this as a savings opportunity in the long run. And so there are tools out there like Ray Capital that can assist in this discussion. And so we can take that step back to really gauge, where are the tax brackets during retirement? As we can see, it can be extremely surprising as to what is contributing to our tax brackets. We have, especially later in life, a lot of withdrawals that happen when we're considering RMDs take place. We have, healthcare expenses that happen in retirement. Some of those things that might not be commonly considered when we're looking at what a client might be assuming their spending might be. Of course, we want to focus on the positives of retirement and some of those things we've been saving up for, like going out to eat, seeing movies, going to the opera, and going on vacations. But those are the other aspects of retirement that we have. Those retirement healthcare costs, long-term care is a big cost in retirement as well. Those cause those spikes in our tax brackets, as we might need to pull more from the portfolio. So this is one of those pieces that can be that conversational piece to really be eye-opening about what we are looking at in terms of spending in retirement, but also where our spending coming from and what is contributing to our tax brackets. And so here we can see we have that low taxable income after retirement before they're age 70 when they start to file for Social Security. And then we have RMDs and Social Security driving up taxable income at RMD age 75. And we can see that surprisingly high taxable income later years of retirement, especially when we're looking at long-term care events, as those would be boosting our withdrawals from accounts to fund those expenses. And so that might be the opportunity. We're looking at those large IRA distributions that drive up the tax brackets without conversions. And here we can see that tax bracket of where they fall into each of the tax brackets. We can see that lower tax rate years, especially in that gap of retirement and Social Security ages. And then we have those higher tax rate years, as we were discussing. And so that's that opportunity that we can really have that flag waved once again of should we be performing Roth conversions? And what does it look like if we perform Roth conversions? And so keeping that in mind, they had some key opportunities when they are retired in that gap of taxable income. And we talked with them, and of course, they're comfortable with filling up the tax bracket and paying some additional taxes up to the 24, 28%, just considering the TCJA tax bracket change to the 28% in 2026, of course. Right now it's 24%, but that will potentially change if we keep up the TCJA. So that's where we're going to see two tax brackets here, because I already see that's a question. So that's going to be why we see that. So by that point in time, when they are 65, that's going to be the 28 tax bracket. And we talked with them and they're comfortable paying those taxes. Here we can see them filling up the tax brackets with our Roth conversion dedicated tool. That's going to calculate how much we'd be converting during those years to fill up those tax brackets. And we'll see here as well that impact to adjusted taxable income with and without the conversion. So as we can see here with the blue color versus the green color in the background, we have a huge decrease in taxable income versus the prior year's tax rates versus our non-conversion scenario. So if we didn't convert, we'd actually be subject to higher taxation in our retirement and later retirement years, especially when you have those spikes later on in life. So this actually provided some cushion for them. And this allowed for them to have 2.3 million more in tax adjusted ending portfolio value rather than their other strategy in terms of no Roth conversions and looking at a different tax efficient withdrawal sequence as well. So this is something that can be utilized and talked about when we are leveraging a tool like Rate Capital. You can leverage this very comprehensive Roth conversion module to look at, should we be filling up tax brackets? How does this impact things? You can also control timing as well. And so that's a key consideration too, when we are talking about Roth conversions and when it might be best applicable for a client to perform Roth conversions is considering, number one, what their situation looks like in surplus cash flow. Can they afford to pay these additional taxes, or should we be waiting till later in life? And if so, it's important to be able to specify that. And so within Rate Capital's tools, you can make that specification to say, hey, we're not comfortable in the next couple of years, maybe for the next 10 years, doing Roth conversions, but after 10 years, and maybe until we're age 80, we're comfortable doing Roth conversions if there's a gap in the tax brackets and we have the opportunity to do so. And so you can let that intelligent Roth conversion tool do that kind of work for you. But those are just some key considerations on the background, as well as looking at their tax brackets, seeing where there might be gaps, and talking about, when we are retired, are we comfortable still paying additional expenses and similar tax rates as to before, or should we be looking at different paths or waiting till later in life? So those are some of those key considerations. When we're looking at the Roth conversions, of course, this can be a great opportunity to have some tax efficiency later in life, as opposed to us pulling all from that tax deferred account and being subject to higher taxes, and also maybe subjecting ourselves to less taxes with RMDs if we had that staying in a 401k, for example, or a traditional IRA. So those are just some of those background considerations and nuances to Roth conversions that might allow for additional savings opportunities. And of course, we can leverage all of these and create that combination of, should we be pursuing that tax smart saving strategy and combining that tax efficient distribution? And how does that impact the plan? And what does that look like? And so we're going to pivot in just a second into what that looks like directly in Wright Capital. But just some of those key takeaways before we make that shift. For today's conversation, this is going to be providing with those key insights that we talked about, those recent changes that have taken effect this year, and how that might provide additional opportunities for you as the advisor to really engage with deeper discussions with your clients and prospects, and to just differentiate yourself from other advisors as well, to say, let's take a look at that simple Roth IRA. Is this available to us? And also, if we see those flags waved for those triggering events, should we be pursuing those NUAs or mega backdoor Roth opportunities or different tax efficient strategies? All of those comprehensive considerations and utilizing tools like Wright Capital can assist in making that conversation easier. And especially for clients, it's important for them to understand why you're saying what you're saying, and having a nice visual backdrop for your conversations can make it a little bit more of an interactive experience and allow for them to easily digest what you're explaining to them. And of course, developing those customized plans and then looking at those, especially at the beginning of the year, annual checkups to see if anything's changed, especially at the start of this year, seeing if they have offered anything different from the employee-sponsored plans. Maybe they did grant the opportunity this year for a mega backdoor Roth or after-tax 401k opportunity. Should that be something we're pursuing? So now you have that additional information. I do also see we've got a couple questions. So let's take a look here. And another great question too, while I'm shifting gears into Wright Capital. So somebody asked, does Wright Capital consider IRMA, or income related monthly adjustment amounts, for Medicare when we are looking at Roth conversions in specific? Absolutely. So that's actually one of my favorite facts about Wright Capital is our very comprehensive Medicare calculations. So when we are looking at doing Roth conversions, you can activate Medicare calculations in Wright Capital. And you can have that be a consideration too when we are looking at the dedicated tool for Roth conversions. And so shifting gears into Wright Capital, just to provide some backdrop here, looking at that example of our Roth conversion module, that's going to be under our dedicated tax tab, where you're going to find under tax estimate some mock-ups of 1040, some additional key insights. So Wright Capital is very comprehensive in its calculations here for taxes. But under the distributions module, this is where we are going to see that dedicated tool to looking at different tax efficient distribution strategies, and also looking at Roth conversions in specific as well. And so looking here at our strategy that we propose, which allows for us to have 2.3 million more in tax adjusted ending value, that was all designated here. And so for that question asked about, do we consider those Medicare premiums and those adjustments, we would see those adjustments occur. And just for reference, we can also view that chart as well and the fluctuations for that chart. So we'd see here where they would be showing that shift, of course, considering age 65 is going to be that key age for them to be eligible for Medicare, but that is available resource in Wright Capital. And so we can also show that impacts too. So let's say we're looking at our tax brackets and we actually want to fill up to the 32-33%. We can show that change. And like I said, you can also specify when conversions end. So if you have that conversation, a client's not comfortable doing Roth conversions, maybe past 80, 75 or whenever, you can really control the timing within this tool as well. But that's just how you can easily toggle between different conversion strategies. And you can see a lot of key comparisons here in terms of assisting in the conversation of, the Roth conversion strategy versus the no Roth conversions and how much more we're going to be tax-free. We can also view the difference in total taxes paid on the federal level here as well. So talking about, we're paying more up front, but we're paying less over time. Another key thing and that I wanted to touch on is when we look at combining the tax smart saving strategy and our tax efficient distribution strategy, let's just revert it back to what we had originally of the 28%. So when we navigate to our retirement module and here under analysis, this is where we can curate our proposals and view a side-by-side comparison of our current path for the clients versus our tax smart saving strategy. And so we can make those proposals here, so those impacts, and we can also view those key comparison charts that we were reviewing. So we can review those difference in taxes paid for each of the different situations. Right now, I'm comparing my tax smart saving strategy and my distributions combination strategy versus our current plan. So as we can see, there's going to be a great difference in invested assets and also a difference in total taxes paid over time. So it's a great question there. And this is going to be a nice space to have that conversation as well. Perfect. And so somebody asked about the nuances of NUAs. So one thing I want to know is it's really important to just really get a grasp of what the employer is offering for 401k plans when we're looking at the different paths and NUAs, seeing what might be available. So if we have a higher concentrated stock, if a client's going to be continuing to pursue buying the same company stock, should we be potentially pausing and not doing an NUA now, waiting till they buy that additional stock and put it in the 401k? And if they plan on retiring maybe next year after they bought that additional stock, should we be looking at an NUA? That's when we can take that information, maybe put a pause on it. It doesn't need to be done right away. It can be done at any point in time in terms of considering, should we be looking at them retiring next year or maybe in 2 years? Should we be performing that NUA to alleviate some of that tax burden? Those are going to be different considerations that is really subject to the individual client's situation and what their path might be in terms of how close they are to retirement, if they want to be pursuing purchasing additional stock from the company and the 401k. It all depends on their situation, of course. So it's a good kind of clarifying question about the considerations there and the nuances. Awesome. Another great question about the new savings opportunities from the Secure Act 2.0. So when we're looking at the new SEP and simple Roth IRAs, those are some great savings opportunities that were introduced from Secure Act 2.0. But when we have those large changes in legislation and savings opportunities, somebody mentioned that it might not be offered at their particular custodian. That can certainly be the case. It does take some time for them to adjust to those recent changes. So they might be slowly rolling this out. It really depends, of course, on what the offerings are for each custodian. It depends upon the employer situation as well, if they're going to be looking at different opportunities in terms of saving. And there is an opportunity as well for matching contributions from a 401k into a Roth 401k that was introduced as well. Those are all elections by the employer, just to note. When we're looking at those new opportunities altogether, those can be slower to adopt, and hopefully it becomes an option, but it certainly depends upon how quick they are to adapt to these recent changes. So it's a great point. When we have these larger changes, it can take some time for larger institutions to roll these out. Another clarifying question, that's a great one. So somebody asked about our opportunity for the after-tax 401k contributions. And so just pulling up the slides. Just for additional reference here. So when we are looking at the mega backdoor Roth, somebody asked when we're talking about that $46,000 number. So what are we kind of referring to here? So it's that idea that if we're maxing out the 401k, let's say it's going to be that $23,000, that is going to be taking away from that overarching $69,000 contribution limit that this is applicable for. So the mega backdoor Roth account or contributions are going to be subject to the overarching limit of $69,000 of employee and employer contributions. And this is going to be shared with the 401k bucket. So if you've got that $23,000 going towards the traditional 401k and maybe $5,000 being matched by the employer, that is going to be, combining both of those when we looked at our sample case, that's going to be only allowing for that example of $38,500 to be saved into the after-tax 401k, aka the mega Roth contribution. So that's going to be that idea of if they are having aggressive employer matching, which is a great opportunity for them, what's going to be happening in terms of how does that impact our mega backdoor Roth savings. Another great question is, does Wright Capital consider the different catch-up contribution ages? Yes, those are all baked into Wright Capital's calculation. So once somebody reaches age 50 in Wright Capital, we would show that boost in savings opportunities. So it's a really great question there. And just to provide some insights, if we are looking at our savings opportunities, we'd show that it would be increasing once somebody hits 50. We see that increase and that jump in savings. Another great question is this recorded? Yes, this has been recorded. So you will receive the recording and that will be available to you. So if you didn't take notes throughout the presentation, no worries. You can definitely watch the recording and take some notes and pause where you need. Awesome. Another great question about the Roth conversions. And if we have somebody that's 59 and a half and they're in that penalty-free age, the system can consider that as well. Another great question was talking about the NUA and how do we model that in Wright Capital. So looking at modeling an NUA, we go to the profile income section. If this is part of the current plan, we click on add income distribution. And this distribution card is very versatile. So this can be used to illustrate normal distributions. If we click on this drop down, this is also what you can utilize to model designated Roth conversions, rolling over to an IRA or NUAs. So if you were looking for a specific strategy, if you've already established that you're going to be converting, $10,000 into a Roth IRA this year, this can be the tool to illustrate that. When we were looking earlier at our distribution module that's dedicated to that conversation, that's really assisting in looking at, those future projections. Should we be filling up the tax bracket to a certain percentage? And what can we be saving there? So this is a different path, but another opportunity that you have available to you in terms of how to model Roth conversions. But looking at the NUA, all you need to do here is you would change that type to NUA. That's going to be the step number one. You can indicate how much we're doing. So if we're doing that $500,000, for example, designate the owner of the account, whether it's the client or co-client, and indicate when this is going to happen. So if this is going to be happening at their retirement age, and then also indicating that cost basis, which is going to be assisting in calculating accurately that tax situation. One of the key things that makes this another versatile tool is that you also have control over taxation. So if this is going to be a penalty-free NUA for any reason, if they've got a specific set of rules that they are falling under, that they're an exception, you can model this penalty-free. The same is true when we're looking at these other distributions. You can fully control taxation. So if we've have a unique situation where it's going to be fully tax-free of a distribution from the 401k, which is a nice situation to be in, you can model that, and the same with penalty-free. So it's a really great question about how to model that in Right Capital. Awesome. Yeah, a lot of really great questions, really great comments as well. Just to reemphasize for anyone that missed it, this is recorded, so you will be able to watch the recording. So no worries if you missed any slides or anything like that, or if you want a reiteration of a specific point that I went over, you will see that recording available to you as well. Awesome. So I see a lot of questions about the CFP CE credit. Very vital question, especially for a CFP CE webinar. So for those that you might have missed it in the intro, so in order to earn the CFP CE credit, you just need to be here for full 50 minutes of content. However, if you're joining us from a live stream source, such as LinkedIn, YouTube, or X, aka Twitter, for those that are still using the Twitter phase, unfortunately cannot offer the CE credit for this session. However, you can sign up for additional CFP CE credit webinars that are free by emailing webinars@rightcapital.com to join our mailing list. But for those of you that are not from one of those sources, you can receive the CFP CE credit as long as you stayed for a full 50 minutes of content. So it's a really great question. I also see a little bit of a conversation happening too about the 59.5 and conversions. So when we're looking at conversions in that 5-year rule, you can model that in Right Capital, but one thing to note is that Right Capital does understand that 59.5 ruling as well. So once they reach 59.5, that's gonna be that prime phase in somebody's life to consider, should we be doing Roth conversions? So probably too, if they were gonna be retiring and we're looking at the Brady's, for example, who's retiring at age 65, they have a different opportunity available to them and they're past that point. But for somebody that is younger, that is a key thing to consider is how old are they and would they be subject to penalties if they didn't pursue the 5-year rule for conversions like that. So it's a really great point, a really great question. Those are all things that would be considered in Right Capital and can be modeled in Right Capital. Awesome. Another follow-up question, is there a quiz for the CE? No, no quizzes. So you don't have to answer any questions there, but just making sure, if you are attending via the Zoom webinar, you would have seen that prompt for your CFP ID. So that's gonna be that one piece of content that we at least need, but there's no quiz for you to fill out. Perfect. And that looks like that's all the time we've got allotted for today. But like I said, I want to say thank you guys so much for joining us on your fine Wednesday afternoon to discuss some opportunities in terms of retirement sponsored plans and some savings opportunities. On behalf of Right Capital, we really appreciate your time. Have a great rest of your week, great rest of your year as well. Take care, everyone.